Back to this impeachment trial. It's going to start in about 49 minutes or so. Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio has written on this and said that in their desperation to attack President Trump, Democrats are trampling on other important constitutional rights. He goes on to say that there was no process whatsoever, no witnesses, no depositions, no hearings, no cross-examinations, and that they don't want President Trump to run for office again. They're scared of him. And this is really at the thrust of this entire effort today to go after him. The congressman joins us right now. Jim Jordan, welcome. Thank you.
Good to be with you, Neil. How are you?
I'm fine. Let me get your take on their take on this, that if we're to believe, some Democrats said they're going to be surprise revelations here. What are they? Because you would think that they'd have already stated them. What are you hearing? Is there any truth to that?
No, I have no idea what they're going to bring forward. What I do know is that the president's argument is so strong on the constitutional basis. He's got a great argument on lack of due process, and he's got a great argument on the facts, and that's why I think there will not be a conviction. I mean, the fundamental question is how can you remove someone from office who's already left? So the Constitution, I think, is clear, and the fact that Chief Justice Roberts isn't even going to preside because the Constitution is clear. If the president is under impeachment and there's a trial of the president, then the Chief Justice has to preside. But because he's not president, he's not going to preside. And again, if the result of impeachment is removal from office, how do you get that result when he can't be removed? It's sort of just a fundamental question on the Constitution. And then, of course, the due process argument, Neil. This impeachment, which was all of 2 hours in the House, makes Adam Schiff look like he was fair last year. And we know he wasn't. But at least in that impeachment, there was depositions. There was the ability to cross-examine and ask witnesses questions, and some hearings, even though the president didn't get to call any of his witnesses. There was at least some semblance of due process. With this one, there hasn't been any. And then, of course, finally, the facts are on the president's side. How do you incite a riot that was already planned? How do you incite a riot when the president said peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard? So I think for all those reasons, you're going to see acquittal. It's just a matter of how long this is going to take before we get to that decision.
Well, I know you mentioned the president's words on peaceful, but he also said we're going to walk right now down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong. And that got the strongest applause of almost anything else he said. There were other comments. Do you think, intentionally or not, Congressman, the president provoked a crowd that might have already been provoked with a lot of the actions you correctly pointed out that were getting the attention of authorities who said threats were present?
No, I don't think so. I think that's just normal political speech of today. And frankly, it wasn't near as aggressive as the speech we've heard from Democrats over the last couple of years. I mean, look, I know 2 days after Maxine Waters did her rant a couple summers ago, my wife and I got the treatment. We got harassed at the theater. So I know what that feels like. It's not pleasant. I know what a congresswoman from Massachusetts said last summer when she said we need more unrest in the streets, Neil, when there was unrest in the streets. Now, how is that helping the situation? So
but is
what
there
the president
said. Do you think there is a distinction for president? I certainly get what you're saying, sir. But when he says things like, when you catch somebody at a fraud, you're allowed to go by different rules, quoting from the president. So I hope Mike has the courage to do what he has to do. He's referring to his vice president at the time. And I hope he doesn't listen to the rhinos and the stupid people that he's listening to. And the crowd goes wild, absolutely wild. Do you think that's provocative language?
No, I do not. Look, the people who did the harm, they need to be held responsible. But I don't think there was any kind of a language from the president that provoked them or got them or incitement in any form whatsoever. And again, you're singling out the president, but the Speaker of the House has used all kinds of language that I think could if you use that standard, frankly, what Democrats have said is a lot worse. So look, if we're going to be consistent, we should be consistent in this. The Democrats haven't been. Republicans have condemned all the violence, all the time, all the political violence, both last summer and what happened at the Capitol. But it's not the president's, it wasn't language that the president used that I think in any way caused this. And specifically, the president said, peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. So how do you impeach a president, Neil? This is a fundamental question. And if you read the Democrats' brief, and if you read the response, the brief from President Trump's lawyers, which I thought was great, how do you impeach a president for constitutionally protected speech? How do you impeach a president for engaging in speech that's protected by the Constitution, the very Constitution we all took an oath to uphold? The Democrats seem to think that doesn't matter, but it certainly does. This is speech that was protected, and it didn't cross the line. And in fact, it was just the opposite when he said, peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard in our political system. So,
well, Congressman, I read, and I respect you very much, but I did read the entire speech, and that peaceful demonstration comment that you made was what a small part of it. Maybe it wasn't his intention to do this. So let me ask you this. Do you think, had he not sort of ginned up the crowd to the degree was, he's a very powerful, in-your-face speaker, they were passionate, would we have had the same outcome? In other words, you do allude to the fact that there were planned uprisings on the Capitol ahead of this, that the Capitol Police were even warned about that possibility. But do you think the president fanned the flames in any way, especially when he talked about joining them on the march to the Capitol? He ultimately did not. Do you think he bears any responsibility for lighting a match?
No, the responsibility is with why wasn't there adequate protection? If we knew there was an attack planned ahead of time, why wasn't there adequate protection and safeguards put in place? We've already heard that there was a request by Capitol Hill Police to have National Guard present, and someone talked about the optics of that not being what was wanted. So why wasn't those steps taken? Why weren't the National Guard put in place ahead of time? They're here now when there's frankly doesn't seem to be any threat whatsoever. Why weren't they there ahead of time? Why didn't we do kind of what we do for the State of the Union address? When you have a meeting of this magnitude with the vice president here or when the president's here for the State of the Union, there are certain safety precautions that are taken ahead of time and put in place ahead of time. Seems to me that should have been done here, especially when we know that the Capitol Hill Police were requesting that kind of posture prior to this, the counting of the electors on January 6th. I think that's the fundamental question that, frankly, we haven't got answers to yet that we need to find out.
Do you think the president should be censored?
No, not at all. I don't. Again, I think this is the American people see this for what it is. This is an obsession by the Democrats. Remember, Neil, 19 minutes after the president took the oath of office on January 20th, 2017, 12:19 p.m., the Washington Post headline read, "Campaign to impeach President Trump has begun." The left, this town, the swamp, couldn't even wait 20 minutes. So they've been trying to remove President Trump from office, frankly, before he even got there. If you look at the Trump-Russia investigation, the Russia hoax investigation, they tried to remove him from office before he got there. Now they're trying to remove him from office after he's left. This is what the American people don't understand. Why don't we focus on doing what's needed to address the situation and the problems that our country faces versus going after a president who's already left office on some ridiculous charge that the Democrats are bringing forward that I think is unconstitutional, that gave the president no due process and is not supported by the facts.
You think the president, if he wanted to, should run again for office?
Heck yeah, that's what they're afraid of. You know, it's funny. They want to disqualify the president from running from office. But the ultimate check, if the Democrats are so confident in their case, the ultimate check is we, the people, the American people and the electorate. So I think they're just afraid that he's going to be on the ballot. I think he should run again. I've said that many times. But the Democrats are obviously afraid of it. That's why they're engaging in this unconstitutional impeachment process.
Do you think some Republicans are afraid of that prospect as well?
Maybe. You'd have to ask them. But look, 75 million people voted for the president. I think if the election would have been held under the rules that were all changed, I think the Democrats knew ahead of this election that the only way they could beat the president was to change the rules in the run-up to the election, which is what they did. So I think the president's a strong candidate. I think he would win, will win again in 2024. But whether, there's obviously some Republicans are called the Lincoln Project who don't want that. But the vast majority of Republicans across the country, 90-some% of them want him to run again. And I think it'd be good for the nation if he did.
All right, Congressman Jim Jordan, you express your mind your own way. We appreciate that. Jim Jordan, getting ready for a trial, it says it's totally unnecessary. That's the battle, and we'll see it decided in just minutes.